Okay, well, welcome to Good Morning Cannabis with the lovely Emily Seelman. Did I say that right?
Yes, you
Awesome.
did.
Okay, so Emily, we are putting out this series of webinars to kind of help people understand where the cannabis industry is going, where it's been, what the experts are seeing, and we consider you out there as an expert. But before we get into that, I know that you were really busy over the past week or so doing something I thought was really important. So before we get into cannabis, can you share what you did kind of over the Super Bowl weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually part of a nonprofit called CERT Ministries. It operates under the umbrella of the Slave Free Project. So we work in rescuing kids who have been trafficked.
Awesome.
So Super Bowl weekend is the largest, domestically, the largest instance of sex trafficking in the country. So it was something that I thought was, only happened really overseas. And then I learned if it happens overseas, it's probably happening here too. And it certainly does. So yeah.
So can you share, was it a successful, whatever you were doing, was it successful? Were you able to help people or?
Yeah, I can't give out too much information, but it was a really great experience. And, I mean, there's so much that goes into it. And it's for as much darkness as you see in these experiences, there's a lot of people that are fighting to help these kids. So it was a really, we do this a couple times a year, and the certain ministries they do this all day every day. So they dedicate, it's a family that dedicates their lives to doing this, and I'm just honored to be one of the people that supports through the operations. But it was very successful, and it's just always one of those things where your life changes. I mean, I look at it and you can't come out not believing that miracles happen and that there's a God, because it is the miracles that have happened in these operations is astounding, but life changing.
That's
Yeah.
great. I really wanted you to share that as part of this because it shows that people in the cannabis space are not just about making money, they're about making impact. Because that's how I feel. That's why I'm in the space. But so tell us a little bit about, let's start with your company, with you, and how you got into doing cannabis, and then we'll go on and I'll ask you about what you see.
Absolutely. So I actually started as an attorney in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that was right around the time when medical cannabis was being introduced to the state. So prior to that, I was in an urban development practicum in law school, and that was when cannabis was decriminalized. And that's usually the path that it takes in states. Cities within a state will decriminalize it, so you're not getting felonies, you're not getting arrested necessarily for carrying small amounts of cannabis. And then a state will legalize medical cannabis for patients. And then after that, they'll legalize adult use. So in Pennsylvania at the time, I was actually very much against cannabis. And when I was in that urban development practicum, and I was tasked with providing research on decriminalization of cannabis in Pittsburgh. And when I did that, my emotion and my prior conceptions around cannabis they were met with the facts about cannabis and the history of cannabis. And when emotion meets that, I had to change my opinion. There was no way that I was right in my preconceived notions around cannabis, and I was blown away. And I couldn't help but advocate for it ever since then, because I knew how many people thought like I did. And so I thought it was important for me to really be a voice for changing the perception around cannabis and seeing it for what it really is. So fast forward to getting into the law firm, medical cannabis introduced, and we started getting clients that were interested in applying in Pennsylvania's first round of operational licensing. And I helped build out the cannabis division at the firm. It was a great firm. I really enjoyed working there. But what I found was consultants in the space were really not providing good work product for their clients. And at that time, everyone was getting away with charging the quote unquote green tax. So if you were getting into the cannabis space, consultants and attorneys and all these groups thought, well, you must be bringing money in. You must have a lot of money, so we're going to charge you extra because you're in the cannabis space. And so I saw this green tax being charged, but no work product being provided for clients. So I thought, how amazing would it be if I could, start my own consultancy and provide the work product and work ethic of an attorney without charging legal fees, without charging a green tax, and just using my skill sets that I learned without practicing, without providing legal advice, but really being the business link and the bridge into the cannabis space that people need, and coming from a compliance perspective and a regulatory perspective. Because the other thing I was seeing was that consultants really, they could write, but they weren't providing the guidance and the service that these clients really needed. And these clients, I mean, it's a sector filled with landmines. Licensing is a field of landmines. And what I found was it was the consultant's job to guide them around those issues, and no one was doing that. So I started my own firm and built a team that just so happened to be pretty much all women. And we now have 15 writers and editors, and somehow it just worked out that most of us are women on the team. And we guide our clients, and we've got clients all around the world, and have been able to guide them in that way that I was hoping to see a consulting firm do for people. So that's been my effort ever since. It's to educate, it's to provide as much certainty in this space as possible, because it is so uncertain and it is a really high risk market. So I want to provide as much certainty in this market as possible for our clients.
So when you're coaching people who are going into this industry, who are considering going into this industry, i.e. being in the plant touching side of it, what are you really saying to them? What are some of the questions that you're asking them to consider?
It's a great question. And it actually promotes a lot of follow-up, but really, to put it concisely, I ask them first what their goals are, because sometimes they don't even really have a clear picture of what their goals are. They just know that it's a really interesting space. They might be in a job that they hate currently, and they see this as a fresh new start. Some may love their current job, but they've got the finances to fund a group, but they may not have the clarity on what that roadmap looks like. So that's usually the first question I ask. The second is, what is your experience in the space? What do you know about the space? Because that also helps frame that first question and the answers that they might have. And then once I get some understanding there, then I can better help assess where they can go in the space and what the opportunities are for them. And then once that happens, then they're better able to create the narrative that they want here and create the space, because there's so much opportunity here. And a lot of it just, they don't know that the opportunities exist and what opportunities exist. So that's usually how I start with clients. And then if they know what they want, if they want to get support in building out their business, then maybe it's just a compliance thing and they need help with compliance. Maybe they're on the licensing side and they just want to get their foot in the door, and our job is to help them select the state, select the license type, and really help guide them through the entire application process. And again, there's so many questions and so many things that you can do incorrectly the first time. Our goal is to say, we learned through these mistakes, we paid for these mistakes, we've won licenses ourselves, we know how to do this. I'll help you avoid the mistakes that I made. I'll help you avoid the mistakes that our team has collectively made, and you can do this right the first time. So that's the goal.
I love doing it right the first time. So from your experience from the past, what are the most frequent mistakes that people make when they're entering into the cannabis world? Besides the mistakes that we can talk about the mistakes that people make in applying for the license, but let's just talk in general. What mistakes do people typically make when they're trying to enter into the cannabis industry?
I think they get a little bit too eager and they don't realize that there's a sequence of incremental steps they need to take to hit their goals. So whether that's licensing or building out a business or building a brand, building a label or a package, like all of these different things, you have the opportunity to take shortcuts or to not really understand the steps it takes to hit the goal that you're trying to reach. So to me, that invites a lot of risk and a lot of costly risk. So by example, if you're looking to create a brand, what does that brand look like? Have you done your due diligence and taken those small steps to understand the regulations around it? There's a lot of regulations around marketing and advertising and what you put on a label. And a lot of people think that the FDA is coming around the corner, but as one of our team members, Sherry Tar, would say, the FDA is already here. So when you think of it in that perspective, I've seen a lot of people say, I just need to do this in a cost-effective way. I want to slap my logo on there and be done with it. And that opens you up to so much liability. And that's one example. So I've just seen people rush so quickly to what their goal is that they forget your most impactful entrance into the industry is sharpening your axe for the first 3 hours and then chopping down the tree on the 4th hour, or whatever that quote is. But I think it's meaningful that the bulk of your time is spent in preparation and a fraction of your time is on execution, because part of the execution is the prep. And a lot of people skip the prep work, and that results in a lot of problems, that results in a lot of cost, time, reputation, energy, financial, all of those things come at a cost. So that would be I think that would be the best way to encapsulate that answer.
So let's talk a little bit about what I guess one of my questions to you would be, since you've been in the space for a while, is what would you say the East Coast can learn from the West Coast? We're talking about cannabis. So the lessons that we learn on the West Coast, we know that everything is moving to the East Coast. I mean, I'm standing in New Jersey now, and I know New York, Connecticut, all the way down the coast, we're going to be seeing people applying for licenses. 5 years from now, it's going to be a totally different world. But what can the East Coast learn from the West Coast, the West-East connect, so to speak?
Yeah, I love this question. A little opinionated about it. I've never actually been asked this question, but I think about it all the time, and I might insert my opinion here if not wanted. But I think that the East Coast can certainly learn how over-regulation can kill this industry and kill opportunities. There are a lot of people that, and don't get me wrong, regulators on the state level, they seem to have very good intentions when they're starting a program. But what I'm finding is they're over-regulating the industry in certain ways. And I'm not talking compliance and making sure the product is good. I think that requires regulation. You want to make sure what people are ingesting is a good quality product and people aren't able to take shortcuts. I'm talking about on the licensing side and the cost side. And when you're pushing out, you're rolling out a market, you have the opportunity to make it more of an open market and allowing more people to get in. Now, the challenge with that is it can become very saturated. Prices can, demand is high, market supply is high, so the prices go a little bit lower. And so it's not as lucrative as, so I guess the best way I can explain this is in using it as an example. Oklahoma, they chose more of an open market system. Now it has its own flaws, but the open market system, it's a lower barrier to entry. It's a lower cost to entry. More people can get in. It's not as lucrative for the multi-state operators because they can't come in and dominate the market. Right. And the other challenge is all of the operators, they're in a heightened competitive state because it's who is the best company. The best companies will win. The ones who remain compliant, who have the best product, who promote it the best, who create the brand equity, brand awareness. And the opposite way, a state like Pennsylvania or how Georgia is a great example of a recent state that is very strict, very few licenses available, and the cost to get in just is substantial. And then you have to pay a lobbyist, and then you have to pay your consultants and your attorneys and your CPAs, and those are all necessary things, but then you're competing and paying a lot of money to throw your hat in the ring for a very small amount of licenses. And you better believe those multi-state operators have already had their foot in the door because they helped with the regulations. They helped lobby how the regulations would be drafted. Now, what happens is the people who want to get in, social equity applicants who've been harmed by prior cannabis laws, Well, they're being told by the state, we've got a social equity program for you. We're going to give out priority grading or extra points if you're social equity, if you're a woman, if you're a minority, if you're a veteran. But at the same time, they're trying to build those social equity components or those diversity components into an application round, but it's already so regulated and the barrier to entry is so high, it still is it's prohibitive. People can't get in. So you have this program that is built to allow people to get in, but it's already so regulated that it leaves people frustrated. And we saw that happen in Illinois. Illinois was boasting about being the premier state to really offer an opportunity to social equity applicants. But it was so competitive for such a few amount of licenses available that it ended up just falling apart at the seams, and they're still tied up in litigation.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
we're seeing that in the East Coast and Midwest. So I think the best advice that I would want to take if I was a regulator on the East Coast is what did the West Coast do wrong? California is so regulated that it is a huge barrier to entry to get in there. The red tape and regulation is so costly and in time and in money that it might be more lucrative to operate illegally, get shut down and open up across the street. And I'm not saying to do that by any means, but that's when you're faced with an opportunity and then you see how high the barrier is, it's very disheartening. So
Sure.
if the East Coast and Midwest can learn from states like Oklahoma and California and Colorado and see what these states did right and see what they did wrong, it would create a really good opportunity for the East Coast and the Midwest.
So let's just pick on a particular state, my home state, the garden state. What do you see as you're looking at the garden state? Because I know we've done some applications. You know, what are you seeing that possibly they may need to reconsider or that they're doing right?
Mm.
I promise, I
I
promise if you don't like this section, I'll just edit it out.
no, it's okay. I really like that they're putting the authority in the local municipalities' hands. Are putting a lot more there because I think what they're trying to do, at least the way I'm seeing how the regulations are playing out on the state level, is that when they put more authority in the local municipality leadership's hands, then they can come up with their own vetting system and their vetting process. And then once they give the green light and they endorse an applicant, then the state is pending, a properly done application on the state level, the barrier is lowered because you've done the work on the state level and this, or on the local level, and the state is basically saying, it seems like to me that once you get that local level support, as long as you get a complete application in and you do it to a certain level that they want on the state level, you will most likely get an application. So unlike Illinois, where it was everyone gunning for 75 licenses,
Right.
and you have over 4,000 applications submitted. Here in New Jersey, it's almost kind of filtering out how it works because they're saying, we're not going to be the ones who say yes or no until your city says yes or no. And you have to prove that you're going to be a good neighbor and a good steward of that endorsement on the local level, and then come to us and then apply. So I like that because it lowers the barrier to entry in that way. It's not 4,000 people trying to get 75 licenses and then they're not really concerned about what their local municipality says because they're just trying to grasp one of those licenses. So I think it opens up the market more. It lowers the barrier to entry, and that's what I love. I would say the challenge with that is they are probably feeling a lot of pressure from the public to get that program rolled out. So a lot of municipal leaders were kind of left scratching their heads and saying, what are we supposed to do with all this authority? We don't even know how this program works. And so a lot of them have required extra education. And so, no program rolls out perfectly. There's a lot of wrinkles to iron out, but over the course of the next 2 years, I think things will get a little more smooth and things will go well. So, and this could all, my opinion, could change once we see how things start to get graded. And will the commission outsource the grading like some states do? They seem to end up in lawsuits when they do that.
Yep.
Or are they going to keep it internal and just make sure that they allow people to actually pass this application process and resubmit until they qualify, and then let the best business win.
So a question that I'm going to be asking pretty much everyone who's on this these webinars is something I feel very passionate about. I don't know if I have the statistics correct, but I heard somewhere that most businesses fail, 90% of new businesses fail within the top 3 years of existence. And I think someone said that with cannabis companies, it's as high as 97%. So let's just assume that that stat is correct. I'm sure someone will send me an email telling me that I'm wrong, but that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. But how does a company become part of that top 3%? That's going to be like, if you're going to see a tagline and you see my name, Todd Polinak, it's going to be top 3%. How we help companies get to be the top 3%. What do you think would help improve a company's chances of being in the top 3% in cannabis?
That's a great question. That's a really terrifying statistic too.
Yes, it is,
my boyfriend, who's also my mentor in business, he's owned a lot of businesses, been very successful. One thing that he taught me that I carried into my business, and I think it's applicable here, is he says that there's two really main reasons why businesses fail. And he may have gotten this from one of his mentors, so I'm not sure who to give the credit to, but I'll give it to him, to Jason.
Give it to him. What's his first name?
His name is Jason Cisneros. He goes by the Bald Vendor. He's got a great consulting company, and I learned a lot from his consulting company. But he says businesses fail from basically poor management or a lack of funding and or improperly used funds. So I know funding can be a big issue for groups because, I mean, you think about, they're up against IRS code 280E, which you are familiar with.
Yep.
And that's a huge, it's bad. And so for people who aren't familiar with it, Todd, you might want to give the high level overview of what that does.
We'll save that for another presentation.
Okay. Basically, you're taxed like crazy.
That's the best way to say it. You're taxed on your gross profit, so it's not
right. So when you can't claim deductions and things like that, you're already up against a really big barrier. So I think the theme of this episode is there's a lot of barriers in this industry.
Yes.
How do you work around the barriers or climb over them? But so that's one thing. And if you don't have a plan for getting the investment that you need, then you might struggle to just get operational because the costs are high. And right now in the market, it's even higher because of the supply chain issues and the labor shortage. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is just poor operational skills. And I see this a lot. Is there are so many creative types in this industry who love the plant. They love to grow it, and that they're artists. And so they love the industry because this is the thing they've been advocating for, and they've been passionate. They've probably been growing illegally on a mountain and hiding for the last 20 years, and now they can bring it out in the open. But they don't know how to run a business, and that's okay. You need to make sure you're paired with someone who does, because at the end of the day, this cannabis is another widget from a business perspective, from an operational perspective. And so if you don't run your business well and you don't have standard operating procedures and you can't scale, then you will die. So just like any other business, that's probably why most small businesses fail and startups fail. So I think those two would be the main reasons why I've seen groups struggle in this industry for sure. But from my perspective, because I don't live in your world, my perspective is that on the operational side, people are taking shortcuts. They're trying to cut corners in areas they shouldn't. They're not laying that groundwork that they need to from a compliance perspective to get their company started on the right foot. And then they don't know how to build a business in a way that's replicable and they can teach it to their employees. So, and then they burn out. I've seen a lot of operators just burn out.
Yes. I think that, I mean, I'll make a comment here. I don't know if you agree or not, but I think some people are actually not going into cannabis right now because they want to see what they can gather from the people who get burned out after they've been in this particular industry for a few years. They want to kind of gather up all the ashes, take those licenses and make money with it.
Yeah,
So
there's a market for it. That's a
there's a
lot
market
of.
for it. What is that called anyway? Is that a, a scrap supply company? I don't know what is from a cannabis. I mean, it's sad, but it's true because I mean, I run across the same people, Emily, all the time, and one of the things that I tell people is I'm surprised and actually warm-hearted by the stories I've heard of people who have been using cannabis, heard many stories about it saving their family, themselves, and how much they want to make a living out of this because this is their dream. But if they're not paired with the right people, it's going to become a nightmare.
Absolutely, absolutely. And honestly, I think if you're a business or you're a person that's trying to create a startup business in this industry, it's now your responsibility to make sure that you are successful because there's a lot of people that are going to be dependent on you, not just for their employment, but for a quality product. And we can see where the industry is going. Pharmaceutical companies are going to start buying these groups out. Groups like
Yeah,
Monsanto are going to come in and try to dominate the cultivation side. So and they're already trying to get into this industry. So that means the quality of product, the pesticides in the product, like all of those things are going to start to expand. The quality is going to go down. To me, the quality is going to go down because it's not going to be organically grown. They're going to try to take shortcuts. They're going to see that bottom line, and that's all they're going to care about. So as startup owners, I think we have the responsibility to put out a product that is high quality, that can stand up and be the ethical companies that can stand up against these other maybe unethical companies that might be coming in as the market matures and federal legalization happens. There's going to be a handful of groups that want to dominate this industry, just like every other industry we see. So why not? We should take the responsibility of building our companies to become like the Unilever of the cannabis industry, but make it ethical. Instead of being unethical and take shortcuts, become ethical, be the ethical players in this industry. So that's what I would like to see. But you can't hit those goals if you can't even start your business well and you can't scale it and you don't have good operations. Those are my 2 cents on it.
let's make it 3 cents. So talk to me about the importance of brand when it comes to cannabis and a company.
I think, well, I was actually just talking to someone about this too. I liken it to the beer taps you see in the bar and how they try to be creative, and then you've got liquor bottles. I like tequila, and I love looking at all the bottles in the liquor store
Yes,
because
fun.
it's where all the art comes out and you want to stand out. Well, that's how cannabis products are in a lot of these stores. And so if you're paying for shelf space and you want to be eye-catching and you want to create an awareness of your brand that creates customer loyalty, but you also have to balance that with compliance because this is a very heavily regulated industry. And I have seen far too many people shortcut the compliance side because they want to push out a label at a very cheap price because they're a startup company and they don't believe that's where they should put their money. And I would argue that is the one of the biggest mistakes you can make because one lawsuit, one improperly labeled product, your whole product line could get recalled. You could get someone who ingests the wrong thing thinking they were supposed to take something else. I mean, we're seeing those lawsuits come to fruition now.
Yep.
Those are the issues that I see. And branding, I think, is awesome. We do some marketing in our company. We help our clients do that, but we absolutely require that it's balanced with compliance. And if we've got people coming in the door that say, I want to just push this out and create a brand loyalty, but let's skip the compliance for now and then we'll fund it later. That's not our client because we don't want to back someone who does that because this is where the customer's health and safety comes into play. And it's also a regulated industry. Does it need all of these crazy warnings? Maybe not. It is cannabis, but you want to have kids avoid it. You don't want your kids to eat it. Things like that. So there has to be a balance there, but you also have to capture an audience and you have to create a certain brand loyalty. So I think it's a very fun part of the industry and I really enjoy it. It is where the art can come out, but it has to be balanced with compliance.
Okay, this is great. So Emily, before we stop, name of your company, how people can reach you. We're going to put this all in when we send this out. I mean, if you guys don't see it already, you can find it. But just to put a plug in for you, tell us the name of your company and how they can reach you.
Of course, thank you. It's Canna Business Services, so CANNA like cannabis, cannabusinessservices.com. So my name's Emily, I'm the CEO, but we've got a fabulous team. And if you go on our website, or we're on pretty much every social media out there, I think. So you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, all of those things. But we're pushing out educational videos, so you'll see them on our Instagram. We're pushing them out on YouTube, on our website. But we try to give a lot of education on our website. So if you go there, you'd be able to sign up for a 15-minute call with us for free. We just like to, hear what you're interested in, see if we can help you. If we can't, then we give you just free education and a good time. So good conversation, at least, I hope. So yeah, that would be the best way to reach us.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on Good Morning Cannabis, and we'll be talking again soon. So great to have you, and I'm going to sign off. So take care.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.